Hi everyone, this is Jim Tolles, and today I want to talk about the sense of newness and uncertainty that can follow releasing a big issue. Initially, what this familiar samskara, these old karmic patterns, these old things that we go through round and round and round, the big circle of life that we always seem to be repeating the same types of patterns over and over again, and the same types of outcomes come. And some we like and some we don't, but they're familiar. And so that familiarity is something that we consider safe. And so in that ego side of it is like, well, I know I'm going over a cliff again, but at least I know it's at the bottom. It's going to that same bad relationship again. You're going to the same type of job where you're going to be used and work countless hours and really hated. But the pay is okay and it's reliable and you know the work, right? This is the same thing as going over the cliff again, even though you know it's coming, you know exactly that you're walking towards it, and then you go. And then at some point in the spiritual path and the growth and the healing that we start to do naturally, we start to release these old patterns. We start to release these habituated tendencies and the core issues and beliefs and emotions and all the things that are underlying them that have got us caught up in that cycle. And in that moment where you suddenly are realizing, I don't have to walk off this cliff anymore, and you stop and you start to move down a slightly different path and you're out of that old flow of it. So maybe you've quit this job, or you've let go of this relationship, you've let go of an addiction, right? And suddenly you're in this new place and you're like, what do I do? And so this, depending on how much of a big release this is, depends on how new it feels. It also depends on how much you want to go run back to what seems safe, that familiar pattern before. And so this is where I'm always encouraging people once again to breathe. It's such a simple thing. I mean, so much of my spiritual advice these days is to stop and breathe, because that breath really drops you into this moment. It can't be anywhere else. You have to be in this moment when you're breathing. You can't say, hey, I'll breathe tomorrow. You'll be dead. But pausing in this newness lets you start to get used to it. It lets you start to kind of survey the options around you. So you've stepped out of this old bad job and you can see why you're always working for tyrannical bosses, that it was an abdication of power. And so what does it look like now for you to be in your power? I mean, you took the first step and now here you are. So what work do you do? Right? So these are the types of questions start to come up. And you don't want to be too quick to answer them. The mind is always looking for the next thing. It's like, once you cleared out a little bit of space in your life, it immediately wants to fill it back up again. A lot of us can really benefit from just actually clearing our physical space, our closets and our attics and our basements and all those types of things, because we collect all this kind of emotional and physical debris that we're carrying around. And, there are different energetic attachments we'll have to that stuff. It's just more baggage. And so when you've gone through your closet and you've cleaned out a whole bunch of clothes that you just don't wear anymore, some that don't fit anymore, and occasionally letting go of some of the things that you still are really attached to, then there's suddenly the space. It's breathe into the spaciousness, let it settle, get used to it, let that initial newness, that initial uncertainty start to fade away. It's too easy to get caught up in the ego mind. Says, I don't know what this is brand new, what does this look like, and everything is strange and different, and you're like, how do I handle this, right? For those of you who are going through a spiritual awakening, this can happen countless times. And I want to be clear that there are many types of spiritual shifts, not just awakening. We don't have a lot of great vocabulary for all the shifts out there, but there are many, many types of spiritual shifts and maturation and growth. So anybody can have these moments in their life. So pause. See what's moving towards you now. See what you naturally want to move towards. These are the reason we have meditation and journaling and all the different techniques out there, and you can have energy healers help clear out your space. It's just to pause, to see where you are, to see how you're growing. A lot of you know I like nature metaphors because at every stage of growth and death, nature simply accepts where it is. If the tree is dying, the tree is dying, and just allows that. If the tree is newly sprouted, it's newly sprouted, and it allows that. And it doesn't compare itself to where it was, where it may be, what other trees around it are doing. It just accepts where it is. And that's a really big important part of being in this newness, because then that next evolution naturally will arise. The more you're here, the more it just becomes actually very natural for that natural arising, right? It's just like, I'm here and I've been here. But the first time you get here, it's just too easy to run back. And in running back, the tendency is to go back to the old things and all those things, and to say they weren't as bad as they were, and start acting it out. But usually, if there's been a true release of some level, because it's a lot of times they're partial. It's like we kind of got it in our head and got sick of it, but we didn't really release the issue in our heart. We didn't really release it in that body level or the subtle levels. If it's a full release, you just don't go back. It just doesn't make sense. You're done, and you move on. But usually, most of us are going through these little partial releases here and there, and then it's like, well, let's go back to. So you go back to that old partner who was really not right for you, but you're bringing a little bit more awareness this time because you've kind of stepped out. And usually that helps to build up more discontent in a good way, right? Where you're like, oh, this really isn't fitting. And now you start to see these other parts that before you couldn't see because you still had too much commitment to being in this type of suffering. And so in that growing awareness, you say, oh, I don't want to be here. And then you leave it again. And maybe you go back again, and you kind of yo-yo until you've really cleared the issue and you say, there's nothing here for me. And as we journey down this path of love, we start to see that only the things that are truly nourishing to us in a deep way matter. That to suffer in any sort of way makes no sense. So if you've come through an issue, congratulations. And if you're now in this newness and this uncertainty, and that fear of the unknown is probably still kicking around, take a deep breath. Rest in this space. And this space may last a couple of days, hours, months, maybe even years, but this is okay. It will pass, and the next thing will reveal itself. So my name is Jim Tolles. I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com, and I hope this was helpful.